Today we are going to count down the top 5 steps that you need to know when making a perfect pie crust. Today I have with me Maggie, who is the pastry chef here at Mitchell's Cafe. So any of those cookies and squares and delicious cakes that you eat when you come here, she made those. So let me know, what are the ingredients that specifically go into making a delicious pie?
So pie crusts usually consist of 3 main ingredients. Fat, flour, and water. There are minor ingredients as well, including salt, sugar, acid, and an egg wash.
And I know some people like to use lard, some people like to use butter, some people use a combination of both of them. Is one better than the other? You mentioned you like to do your own thing.
Yeah, so personally my favorite pie crust recipe uses cream cheese and butter.
So butter.
Yes, butter and cream cheese are both mainly used for flavor. They have a higher water content than, say, lard or shortening, which are 100% fat. So those are used for a flaky crust, whereas butter and cream cheese are for flavor.
So basically it's up to you what you want to do, depends what you want the outcome to be.
Yeah, what you're going for.
Coming in at number 4, we have the style of pie crust you want to make. So please explain this. I have no idea what you mean by that.
So there are different styles of pies. So for example, there's unbaked versus baked, and this refers to the crust. So say, think like chocolate cream pie versus apple pie.
Good.
And then there's also double crust versus single crust. So again, chocolate, cream, apple.
Okay, so what's the difference? You can have flaky or mealy, you were saying?
Yeah, so the dough can be either flaky or mealy. A mealy dough is best for the bottom of pies because you're not going to get a soggy bottom where, you know, the liquid is like going into all of those flakes.
Yeah, you don't want that.
The flaky crust is great for the top, and it's mainly for taste and texture and mouthfeel and that kind of thing.
They always say, try not to overwork pie dough, make sure the butter's cold, always work with extremely cold water. I've even heard put an ice cube in the water to make sure it's that cold. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, the main thing, everything has to be as cold as you can possibly get it.
Okay.
Some people freeze their butter if they're using their hands, if you have warm hands. Some people use a pastry cutter if they're using their hands. They'll stick their dough in the fridge for like days sometimes.
Because if it's warm, then what happens? It starts to move?
Yeah, you're gonna get all of that fat kind of melting into the flour, and it's gonna end up like changing the texture of it and change like the.
Would it be gluey?
It gets kind of like soggy, and like the butter sometimes melts out of the pie. So if you've ever had your butter like leak out into the bottom of your like your pan.
Oh my gosh. No.
That's yeah.
Okay, everything needs to be really cold because you want no butter leaking. That doesn't sound like a good pie.
No, it's problematic.
Coming in at number 2, we have rest. It always says rest for 30 minutes, rest for 2 hours in the fridge before you fill it and put it in the oven. But then the crust still moves. So what is going on?
So rest to me is like, I was debating putting it as number 1. It's really important because you're working the dough and you're developing the gluten, and it pulls it tighter. It makes everything shrink as soon as it hits the heat. So that rest will allow that to relax. So if you are resting your dough in the fridge overnight, just like in a little puck, and then rolling it out the next day.
Okay, so 2 rest periods.
Yes, I like to rest once in the fridge when you haven't rolled it out, and then once you've rolled it, I give it like another at least 30 minutes, and that's like a bare minimum.
Because you want those pretty edges to stay like that, right?
Yeah, and if I have time, like if you can plan ahead for your pies, give yourself like 3 days. You could rest this for a whole other day in the fridge, and it would be better.
No issues.
No.
Awesome. Okay, I like that because then you don't get all this work that you put into your pie, and then one edge is like caving in and the other one's perfect. You don't want that. That's not good for company.
No.
Number 1, we have mixing. So why is mixing the most important step over all the other ones we just listed?
So what we just talked about with the gluten resting, so that's why mixing, or rather making sure you're not over mixing, is the most important thing. Because an overmixed dough, you can't save it. It's done.
There's no way to save it at all.
It's garbage.
Okay, don't do that.
So the Three main mixing methods are to use your hands.
Which I've heard is not good.
You're risking warming up the butter and, not having that everything cold rule. You can alternatively use a pastry cutter if you have one of those. It's like a little claw thing with
Yeah, like the blades. And it has that handle that you
a
just
bunch
press
of
in.
knives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if you have power tools in your home, these two are great in interest of time.
Right. They're quicker.
However, you really risk overmixing in any sort of power tool use. Using your hands, you can feel when your butter chunks are the right size because you're, squishing them yourself. And for a flaky crust, this would be good. For a mealy crust, we'd go a little bit smaller. It's more intuitive. You can feel what you're doing.
Okay, I think we got all we need then to make a perfect crust.
That's all for this Top 5. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Shaw Spotlight and use the hashtag TopInTheMac to give us ideas for the next Top 5.